We may begin by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha in honor of Sayyida Rabab, wife of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب الغرباء يا مظلوم كربلاء السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته السلام على من الإجابة تحت كبته السلام على ساكن كربلاء فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي يا سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إن الحسين مصباح الهدى وسفينة النجاة صدق رسول الله وآمنا به. زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. The days following the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada were days that were marked with extraordinary and phenomenal natural events. It is recorded in the books of history from a number of sources. Historians from the Ahl al-Shia, historians from the Ahl al-Sunnah, and even historians from outside the madhab of Islam, that the days following the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the structure of nature in itself was altered. Notice this tradition which is narrated in Jala'ul Uyun, where a companion by the name of Ali ibn Mashhar al-Qarshi narrates. He narrates from his grandmother. Her grandmother was alive and present at the time of Karbala. For she says, حين قتل الحسين ابن علي عليه السلام مكثنا سنة وتسعة أشهر ورعينا السماء مثل العلقة لم ترى الشمس فيها أبدا. This woman says, a grandmother of Ali ibn Mashhar al-Qarshi, she says that when Hussein ibn Ali was killed, for a period of 1 year and 9 months, the sun ceased to shine. There was no light from the sun. In fact, she goes on to say that the sky in itself and the darkness of the color of the sky represented a blood cloth, ulqa. You've seen when you have a blood cloth or a bruise on the skin, how does the color become reddish, darkish, bluish? She says for a period of 1 year and 9 months, the sky was like this, beginning from the day of Ashura. 1. Jala'ul Uyun. Number 2. Ibn Shahr al-Shub mentions a similar narration on the authority of a lady known as Zuhda or Zuhda al-Azadiyya from the tribe of Azadi. She says, حين لما قتل الحسين ابن علي أمطرت السماء دما وحبائبنا وحبابنا وجرارنا صارت بدم صارت مملوءة بدم. This woman narrates that when Sayyid al-Shuhada or when Hussein ibn Ali was martyred, the skies began to rain blood to the extent that when we came out, what is understood from the context is that the next morning when they came out of their houses, she narrates that she found all her harvests, her crops, and the animals that she kept within her farm or within her house had all been covered with blood. 2. From the books of the Ahl Sunnah, historians, notice this tradition in Sawa'iqul Muhrikah by Ibn Hajar. He narrates, لما قتل الحسين بن علي لم يوجد or ما وجد حجر إلا وتحته دم عبيد. He says, when Hussein ibn Ali was killed, there was not a single stone that was turned except that underneath that stone we found blood. Damun abit, not the color of blood. Abit, yani liquid, flowing blood. But Allama al-Khawarizmi in his Maktal al-Khawarizmi goes on to say that there were stones found as far as Baytul Muqaddas that were filled with blood because of the day of Ashura. Number 4, outside the historians of the Ahl Shia and Ahl Sunnah, you come and you find within the archives of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle at times written by the Christian authorities at that time. They mention in the year 685 AD here in Britain, 685 AD, the year that corresponds with the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, They say in the year 685 AD in Britain, it rained blood, and there wasn't a single placement of butter or milk except that it turned into blood. A change or a manifestation of extraordinary or phenomenal events within the course of nature for Sayyid al-Shuhada. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifested his wrath and his anger for what happened to the grandson of Rasulullah through these events. Which is why when Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra came to Kufa and she looked at the people, she said to them, أَفَأَجِبْتُمْ إِن مَطَرَتِ السَّمَاءُ دَمًا وَلِعَذَابِ الْآخِرَةِ أَحْزَى وَهُمْ لَا يُنْصَرُونَ. She says, will you be surprised then if you find that the skies are weeping blood and the torment or the punishment of the hereafter is more severe, and on that day these people, yani the killers of Sayyid al-Shuhada, have absolutely no one to help them. These changes within the course of nature serve two purposes. Number one, as we said, it shows the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the event of Karbala, the killing of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the grandson of Rasulullah, master of Jannah, has been put under siege in Karbala for 3 days, no water, no food, and then they have been brutally massacred and butchered on the sands of Karbala while the Muslim Ummah watches. This is not an event that is taken lightly. It is not an event that is forgotten within a day or two or a year or two. This is a burning sensation and grief that will continue to live within the hearts of the mu'mineen until the day of judgment. Karbala has created an emotional wound within the heart of Sayyid al-Zahra. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الزَّهْرَى. And this wound and this pain, she will express it on the day of judgment. As we've mentioned in previous lectures, the marasim, the events of the mahshar and the beginning of the unfolding of the events of the day of Qiyamah begin with the complaint of Sayyid al-Zahra. The mahshar watches, Allah is the judge. This on one side. And on the other hand, this was a means which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to draw the attention of the Muslim Ummah towards the severity of the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada. For these changes in nature, number one, express the anger of Allah. Number two, to draw attention towards man that what has happened on the 10th of Ashura is no normal event. Apart from the killing of Sayyid al-Shuhada, an event that breaks the skies into pieces, that makes the arsh from the very foundation to shake with anger, is the event of the captivity of the women of Ahlul Bayt. Hakikatan, the mind cannot comprehend the level of dhulm and the extent of the humiliation carried out on the women of the family of the Prophet. This Sayyida Zainab al-Kubra, Kulthum, women who lived in honor, women who lived in dignity, women who lived in an environment of hijab in its practical sense, in its entire sense, are now made captive and their hands tied by the likes of people like Shimr and Ibn Ziyad. وَأَيِّ مُصِيبَةٍ. No family of any other prophet from Adam to Khatam have their women been subjected to such oppression and humiliation. How big must have the heart of Sayyid al-Sajjad been when he sits on that camel without a saddle, his hands shackled, in some narrations his hands shackled to his neck, and he watches the army of Iblis carry whips in their hand and whip his aunts and his cousins and the women of his family. The heart cannot comprehend the reality of this. The world cannot seize, or the world cannot at any point stand to understand the pain that Imam Sajjad went through. The women of Ahlul Bayt, women such as Sayyida Zainab al-Kubra, historians mention that while she was in Kufa, not a single person had seen, leave aside the face of Sayyida Zainab, had not seen the shadow of Sayyida Zainab. Not only from the days of Kufa, but from the days of Medina, such that when she would want to go for the Zyara of her grandfather in Masjid al-Nabawi, or the Zyara of Sayyid al-Shuhada al-Hamza, or for the Zyara of her mother al-Zahra, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha, she would not come out of her house except in the dark of the night. And even that, when she came out, she had Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas behind her, Imam Hassan in front of her, Imam Hussein on the right, and Muhammad al-Hanafiya on the left. And despite that, they would turn off the candles in Masjid al-Nabawi. A woman who has lived in such honor and dignity and at the peak of hijab today is the same Zainab who has been brought into the majlis of kuffar and the majlis of wine and alcohol when she was brought into Kufa. When a person understands the reality of hijab, understands the reality of honor, understands the reality of haya when it comes to their lives, and implementing and encouraging and cultivating the concept of haya within a family structure, the mind goes crazy when they think about how Sayyida Zainab was brought into the majlis of Ibn Ziyad. Which is why in a lot of the houses, in the presence of Maraja, when there would be majalis of Ashra Zainabiyya, the masa'ib would be only one statement. The khatib would sit on the mimbar and he would say, دخلت زينب or أدخلت زينب في مجلس Ibn Ziyad. the Khatib would only say that Zainab was brought into the presence of Ibn Ziyad, and you see the Maraja breaking out in tears. One of the Maraja would weep in Qom, would weep to the extent that people thought because of his old age and his brittle body, he would die from the Masa'ib on this one statement. أي مصيبة وأي بلاء. Historians have narrated in their entirety that the women and the captives from Karbala were taken to Kufa on the 12th of Muharram, after the time of Zawal. As we said, Ibn Ziyad buried and shrouded those from the kuffar who had died and left the bodies of Sayyid al-Shuhada and their ashab. And on the 12th of Muharram, the captives, those who were remaining from the camp of Sayyid al-Shuhada, were rounded and taken towards Kufa. Historians have differed over the number of captives that were taken from Karbala towards Kufa. Historians, great historians, respectable historians, such as Abdul Razak al-Mukarram in his Maqtal mentions the number of captives as 20. Shaikh Abbas al-Qummi, rahmatullah alayh, in Nafas al-Mahmum, also points towards this number, even though it may not be known that this was his belief, but he mentions the number 20. And on the other spectrum, there are historians such as Shaykh Mahdi al-Ha'iri al-Mazandarani, the author of Ma'ani, who has mentioned that the number of captives was 60 in their entirety. And when we look at the breakdown of the captives, and we read through the books of history, the books of Maqatir, we are able to support the view of Shaykh al-Mazandarani greater than the stance of Abdul Razak al-Mukarram and Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi. And with all due respect to these two scholars, the 20 that they mention in numbers may have been that they counted 20 from the women of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who were known at that time, and from the women of Imam Hussein. But when we look at the entirety of the number, we find that this number is more closer towards 60. From amongst the captives, you will find that the people who were taken from Karbala to Kufa, there were 5 men amongst the Sabaya. Amongst the captives, there were 5 male. One of them being Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zain al-Abidin, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. The second being his son, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. And traditions mention that our 5th Imam was about between 3 to 5 years of age during the event of Karbala. For Imam Sajjad was there, Imam al-Baqir was there, and then there were 3 males from the lineage of Imam al-Hasan who had survived the advent of Karbala. One of them was the son of Imam Hassan called Zayd, a second one called Amr, and the third son of Imam al-Hasan known as Hassan al-Muthanna. Hassan al-Muthanna was married to one of the daughters of Imam al-Hussein by the name Fatima. And when we look into the children of Imam al-Hussein and the children of the A'imma in general, you will find many times there are discrepancies in the numbers of the children for a number of reasons, for multiple reasons. One of the reasons being that the A'imma, most of the time, even if they had multiple children, they would name their children Fatima from the daughters and Ali from their sons. So you would have Fatima al-Kubra, Fatima al-Sughra, Fatima al-Awsat, for example, Aliyun al-Akbar, Aliyun al-Asghar, Ali al-Awsat. These are reasons or points that lead towards discrepancy. In any case, Hassan al-Muthanna, Zayd and Amr were the three children of Imam al-Hassan who survived the Battle of Karbala and were taken as captives together with Imam Sajjad and Imam al-Baqir. It is worthy to mention that Hassan al-Muthanna was one of those companions of Imam Hussein who actually fought within the battle. In regards to Amr and Zayd and their ages, it seems from the books of the narration that there were young children within the age or bracket of 10 to 12. For whether they fought or they not fought is not accurately or is not mentioned outright within the books. But Hassan al-Muthanna, who was married to the daughter of Sayyid al-Shuhada, fought in Karbala. And historians or Maqatil, Arbab of the Maqatil narrate that Hassan al-Muthanna, when he fought in this Hamla of Bani Hashim, he killed 17 men of the Kuffar. He fought to the extent that as he was brandishing his sword, one from the Kuffar came and they struck his right arm from the elbow. For they severed his right arm, and when they severed his right arm, he fell down in the state of jihad and fell unconscious. The pain of his arm being severed, and the heat of the armor, and the thirst of 3 days, and the hunger contributed towards weakness, for he fainted in the battlefield. Traditions tell us that he gained consciousness, or he regained his consciousness after Asr on the day of Ashura, towards the time of Maghrib, for Sham-e Ghariba. And when he stood up, or when he regained consciousness, and the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad wanted to kill him, his mother, by the name of Khawla, who was from the tribe of the Fiza'iyya, came, and her tribe was one of the tribes that were participating amongst the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. So they came and they interceded for Hassan ibn Muthanna, interceded for him such that he may not be killed, and he was taken captive. For these were the 5 men or male who accompanied the women as captives. These are 5. Outside these 5, the rest of the captives we have are from the women of Ahlul Bayt. Some of them include the daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen, some of them include the daughters of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the daughters of Imam al-Hassan, and so on and so forth. From the daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen that were taken captive, we have the daughters of Imam Ali from Sayyid al-Zahra, and the daughters from the rest of the wives that Imam Ali married after Sayyid al-Zahra. So from Sayyid al-Zahra, the 2 women who were taken captive, number 1, Sayyida Zainab al-Kubra, who was married to Abdullah ibn Ja'far, and then we have Kulthum. Again, historians, or a small group of the historians, have said that actually Kulthum was Zainab al-Kubra, and there were no 2 daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen. However, this in itself is a view of the minority, and it is widely established that there were actually 2 daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Zainab al-Kubra and Zainab al-Sughra. Zainab al-Sughra, more commonly known as Kulthum, 2 daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen from Sayyid al-Zahra. The other daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen was Sayyida Ruqayya, her husband being Muslim bin Aqil. And then we have Sayyida Khadija. Sayyida Khadija, who is buried in Kufa, along or just next to Masjid al-Kufa. For those of you who have performed the Zyara of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Iraq and have visited at Kufa, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all give us the tawfiq of a Zyara. Sayyida Khadija, buried in Kufa, she was married to Abdul Rahman ibn Aqil, the brother of Muslim bin Aqil. 4. And then we have Sayyida Nafisa. And then we have Sayyida Sukayna. Sayyida Sukayna, the daughter of Imam Ali, is buried where? In Daraya, in Syria, in the outskirts of Damascus, where historians tell us that when Sayyida Zainab came back to Damascus under the order of Yazid, Sayyida Sukayna accompanied her. So you have here 6 daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen and 2 daughters by the name of Fatima. So all in all, a total of 8 daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen taken captive. In addition to that, you had the wives of Imam al-Hassan. From the wives of Imam al-Hassan, you had a woman by the name of Sayyidah Khawla. Sayyidah Khawla, the mother of Hassan al-Muthanna, the lady from the tribe of Fizaiya who interceded for him. So she was one, Khawla. And then you have Ramla, the mother of Qasim. And you have 2 other women from the wives of Imam al-Hassan by the name of Ishaq and Bashir. So here you have 4. In addition to the wives of Imam al-Hassan who are present, you have the daughters of Imam al-Hassan. In al-Manaqib, it is mentioned that there were between 6 to 8 daughters of Imam al-Hassan, even though books of the Maqatil do not explicitly mention the presence of the daughters of Imam al-Hassan. It is not a far-fetched conclusion to assume that they were there in Karbala. The first indication being that one of the daughters of Imam al-Hassan by the name Fatima was already present in Karbala, and she was married to Imam al-Sajjad, and she gave birth to Imam al-Baqir. So this is one. Number 2, we have from the concept, and we know very openly in history, especially when Qasim came to ask permission from Imam al-Hussein to fight in the battle, what did Sayyid al-Shuhada say to him? Sayyid al-Shuhada said, how can I let you go to fight when you are a wadi'ah? You are a trust from your brother Hassan to me. From here we are able to understand that the children of Imam Hassan were a trust placed under the care of Sayyid al-Shuhada. For when Sayyid al-Shuhada was leaving Makkah to go towards Medina, and from Makkah eventually to Karbala, we have enough proof or credible basis to assume that Imam Hassan took the daughters, or Imam al-Hussein took the daughters of Imam Hassan with him. Had he left them in Medina, under whose care and under whose trust would he have left them when his own life was danger in Medina? Which is why he left Medina in the first reason. For the presence of the daughters of Imam al-Hassan in Karbala is not a far-fetched notion, even though it is not explicitly mentioned in the books of the Maqatil. So you have between 6 to 8 daughters of Imam Hassan. You have 4 wives of Imam al-Hassan. You have 8 daughters or 6 daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen. In addition, you have the 5 men. In addition to this, you have the 3 wives of Imam al-Hussein. From the 3 wives of Imam al-Hussein, Sayyidah Rabab was one of them. Ishaq was one of them. Ishaq was this wife of Sayyid al-Shuhada, who spent the event of Karbala while being in a state of pregnancy. Ajib. And she was made to walk and made to sit on an unsaddled camel in a state of heavy pregnancy from Karbala to Kufa, and made to walk from Kufa to Sham. Which is why when you go towards Aleppo in Syria, you find way on the mountains there is a markad called Muscat or Masjid al-Muscat. You have Masjid al-Saqta and you have Masjid al-Muscat. Masjid al-Muscat is that point where the lady or this wife of Imam al-Hussein by the name of Ishaq miscarried. A woman being in a advanced stage of pregnancy, being made to walk and brutally assaulted in these dire conditions, eventually fell and miscarried. And this son that was within her womb, Imam al-Hussein had named him Muhsin, just like the way Muhsin of Sayyidah Zahra was killed. And this mosque is present in Halab even today. For the wives of Imam al-Hussein, and then we have the daughters of Imam al-Hussein. The author of Kashf al-Ghumma says that there were 3 daughters of Sayyid al-Shuhada who were present in Karbala and taken captive. The 4th daughter being Fatima al-Alila, who was left back in Medina. In addition to all these women, there was the wife of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas by the name of Lubaba. And then there were the wives, according to some traditions. Aliyun al-Akbar was also married, and so some of the traditions mention, or the ashab or arbab of the makatil mention, that the wife of Aliyun al-Akbar was also there. In addition to this, there was Sayyida Fidda. In addition to these, there were the children and the women of the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You look at, for example, when you read through the books of the history that talk about the narration of Karbala, you find that the wife of Muslim ibn Awsaja was also present in Karbala, such that the wife of Muslim ibn Awsaja, when Muslim was killed in the battlefield, she sent her son forward to fight in the battlefield. When Imam Hussein looked at this young child, what did he say? He said to him, "O son, go back to the tent and go give consolation to your mother. I fear for you, lest if you come into the battlefield and you are killed, your mother will be afflicted by two tribulations, the death of her husband and the death of her son." When Imam Hussein said this, the son, or this young child, looked at Sayyid al-Shuhada, his age being 11 or 12, with the most innocent of eyes. He says to Imam al-Hussein, "But my mother has sent me to fight in your defense." For the wives of Muslim, or the wife of Muslim ibn Awsaja, and the wives of the rest of the companions were mu'minat who would not leave the company of Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra. For when we gather all these numbers together, we are able to assert that at a maximum number, when we look into the traditions of those mentioned by the likes of Sayyid al-Shaykh al-Mazandarani, the number of captives being 60 is not a far-fetched notion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Time is running and racing against me, and there are a number of issues to talk about the events that happened between Karbala and Kufa, and the events that happened within Kufa. But there is one important point that I want to mention for you. The revolution of Sayyid al-Shuhada is a revolution that is supposed to inspire us in our lives, such that we look at the values and the principles that underline the revolution of Sayyid al-Shuhada, and then seek to implement these values in our lives. We look at the principles that Imam believed in, principles that the Imam lived for, and then we try and believe within or in those same principles. Notice from the door of principle and aqaid what happens. When the captives were brought into Darul Imara, the presidential palace, as you can say, in the presence of Ibn Ziyad, notice what Ibn Ziyad said to Sayyidah Zainab. He said to her, "Alhamdulillah alladhi fadahakum wa katalakum." He says, "Praise be to Allah who exposed you and killed you." Yani, who exposed your men and killed your men. And then notice what he says to Imam Sajjad. When he saw Imam Sajjad and he asked, "What is this man's name?" For Imam Sajjad replied by saying, "Ana Ali ibn al-Hussein." He said, "I am Ali, the son of Hussein." For Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad replied by saying, "Awalam yaqtulullah," or "Awalam qatalallahu aliyya." Did Allah not kill Ali? So Imam Sajjad said, "I had another brother by the name of Ali. The people killed him. Allah didn't kill him." Notice the trend in the conversation of Ibn Ziyad al-La'in. He talks to Sayyidah Zainab and tells her, "Allah killed your brother." He talks to Imam Sajjad, he says to him, "Allah killed your brother." This majlis, when the captives are brought in the presence of Ibn Ziyad, the mansion or the presidential palace is open to all the citizens of Kufa. Everybody is gathered within this palace to watch what Ibn Ziyad has to say to them. For Ibn Ziyad comes forward with the notion and tries to propagate the idea within the minds of the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has killed Imam Hussein in Karbala. It was Allah that killed the army of Sayyid al-Shuhada. He was propagating the thought that Yazid ibn Muawiyah is the representative and the Khalif of Allah. Whatever Yazid does is a manifestation of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look at how this Amawi thought and concept has trickled down amongst the minds of the Muslim Ummah over hundreds and hundreds of years. Because with a thought like this, when the notion is put forward that Yazid, being a tyrant, despite being a tyrant, is a Khalif of Allah, and whatever he does is the manifestation of the will of Allah. Future generations or down the line, scholars came forward within the same line of thought to come and say that if a Khalif or a ruler over a Muslim Ummah is unjust and is a tyrant, the Ummah is not allowed to stand up against him. If they have given bay'ah, they cannot revolt against a tyrant. They cannot revolt against a leader, even if he is a fasiq. The ummah must submit to his rule, because the fact that he is in a position of leadership, he has got an endorsement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then these lines are fine-tuned because a person's aqidah, a person's theological belief that he carries within his heart, he implements them in his life. He judges various situations that affect various domains of his life by applying the principles that are taught to him. So over here you have this miskin who thinks that every ruler who is a tyrant, it is not allowed and it is a sin to stand up against him. In revolt, what happens? The Muslim Ummah accepts to be madloom. They accept the notion of oppression. They agree and they embrace it and take it as a part of their lives and remain within the yokes of disgrace and humiliation until they die and the next generation replaces them. And such thoughts are fine-tuned even into political channels. And even though our speech over here is not of a political nature, but from a humanitarian nature, look at how these thoughts are used to define the stance of the Muslim Ummah. As you all know, the marking of Shahr Muharram this year coincided with the bombings in Gaza and Palestine. And this is not something that is new to history. It's not the first time that it has happened. As you may remember, in 2009 as well, or 2010, 2009, the beginning of Shahr Muharram coincided with the bombings of Gaza as well. It happened a few years ago as well. They came and they flooded Gaza, destroyed everything within its infrastructure and killed hundreds, if not thousands of children. At that time, you have a Salafi Sheikh from the Nawasib who subscribes to the school of Bani Umayyah come out on satellite TV, and what is his message for the Palestinian people? He says the message to the Palestinian people is that our hearts are bleeding and we feel sorrowful for you, but people of Palestine, this is a musibah endorsed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah always afflicts the mu'mineen with bala. Yani the Zionists who are attacking you and stealing your land from under your feet, and the presence of corrupt ulama from the Ahlun Nawasib who take a neutral stance, or you people of Palestine, have sabr. Don't stand up. Don't criticize the ulama of Hijaz for not issuing fatwas or verdicts to condemn the killings. See how these concepts and flaws in aqaid are trickled down the years? The same Adnan al-Arur who gave out the statement, subhanallah, fast forward 3 or 4 years later, why did his stance change against Syria? If the Palestinians have to do sabr in the face of the oppression of the Zionists, then tabbik, use the same kalam, use the same logic when it comes to Syria. If Bashar al-Assad in reality is an oppressor and is a tyrant, then why are the people standing up? Why are they supporting the revolution against Bashar al-Assad? Why don't they say that Bashar now is a manifestation of the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Tabbi kalam. If you have one general rule, if you have one statement, if you have one aqidah, you have one principle, apply it uniformly across the Muslim ummah. Why this double standard? Because there is the presence of Shias of Ahlul Bayt in Syria. There are other agendas. And we don't want to make this political, but we talk from a humanitarian point of view, from a religious point of view, where religious beliefs and concepts which people mobilize around are distorted. Sayyid al-Shuhada stood up against this. And the Shias of Ali Muhammad who held on to the revolution of Sayyid al-Shuhada have lived a line and have lived a stance that has always been against corruption and dhulm throughout their history. They have had the honor and the pride of being the flag bearers of freedom wherever they went. Look at the stances of the Hawzas and the Marajas all over the world, from Iran to Iraq to Syria, and look at how they walked within the stance and sought inspiration from the revolution of Karbala to say no to dhulm. Some from the mu'mineen had brought to my attention that at one time, during his later stages, the Shah even wanted to build a casino within the precincts of Qum al-Muqaddas. Every form of fasad. Look at what our Maraja and the ulama who sought inspiration from Sayyid al-Shuhada. Look at how they shook the world. Maraja in Iraq, how they protected the Hawza Ilmiya from Ba'athist thought. People who would sell not only their families, but would sell their motherland for a handful of dirhams and dinars. You will not find a Shia who loves Sayyid al-Shuhada and seeks inspiration from him to ever fall into such a trap. Which is why we stress utmost importance in preserving the legacy of Karbala. Because the biggest thing, the biggest incentive or the biggest characteristic that a person can cultivate from the Majalis Husseini is inspiration from Sayyid al-Shuhada. Inspiration and determination. Determination to stand up against corruption inside Islam and outside Islam. Inside the madhab, outside the madhab. Ba'ad, the Shia of Imam al-Hussein, the Husseini, doesn't look who is in front of him, who is in a position of power. If there is dhulm, he stands up to the dhulm. Determination. And when we use these words, stand up to dhulm, it does not mean or it does not entail taking a violent stance. It doesn't entail taking an intolerant stance. Just determination. I will not sell my faith. Even if the people around me sell their faith, I will not sell my faith. The talk is much and the time is run out. For inshallah, up till the time of Arba'in and before Ashr Zainabiyah, we will have a series of lectures where we talk about seeking inspiration in our daily lives from the revolution of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Inshallah. I want to draw your attention back to Darul Imara when the captives were brought into the majlis of Ibn Ziyad. It is narrated at this time the blessed head of Sayyid al-Shuhada was brought to Ibn Ziyad. And he would look at this head, and many times he would smile, and he would take a rod and begin to hit the blessed teeth of Sayyid al-Shuhada. At this time it is narrated that Sayyida Rabab came forward and she took the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada and she began to weep and she hugged it and she cried out, Ya Husayna, ma nasitu wa Husayna. Ata'anatka asinnatul a'da. أطعنته أسنة الأعداء وغدروه بكربلاء صريعا لا تسقى الله بجانبي كربلاء. Rabab looks at the head and she begins to cry. She says, Oh Hussein, I have not forgotten you, oh my Hussein. And she begins to weep and cry and says, Oh Hussein, truthfully, did you become the object of the swords and the spears, and the people killed you and left you unburied on the plains of Karbala? May the land of Karbala never be watered. And who can understand the pain of Sayyida Rabab? It is narrated that on the 11th of Muharram, when the tents were burnt and Sayyida Zainab and Kulthum were gathering all the women and taking account of them, they could not find one woman. This woman was Sayyida Rabab. Sayyida Zainab went running around the battlefield looking for Rabab. Do you know where she found her? The traditions tell us that Rabab was sitting behind the burnt tent, looking at the remainder of the burnt cradle, crying out, Asgar, Abdullah, Radi, Abdullah. Crying out, where is my baby Abdullah? Allah, Allah. This is that Rabab that as she would walk from to Kufa and from Kufa to Sham, sometimes she would weep over the death of her husband. Sometimes she would weep over the killing of a young child, Abdullah Radi Ali al-Asgar. Allah, the traditions tell us that many times as they would camp towards the night, Sukaina or Sakina would be crying, so Rabab would put her to sleep. This we can understand, a 5-year-old girl. But when have you seen a 5-year-old girl console her mother and make her mother go to sleep? The traditions tell us that at nights, Sakina or Sukaina would look at her mother Rabab, who would sometimes cry for Hussein and sometimes cry for Ali al-Asgar. And this Sakina, 5-year-old girl who has lost her father, she would come and she would hug her mother. She would wipe the face of her mother and she would say, Oh mother, do not worry, Allah is with us. This is that Sayyida Rabab in Karbala when she had to come back after Arba'in, when they were returning back to Medina. Sayyida Sajjad and Imam Zainul Abidin mount all the women on the camels, leading them back towards Medina. They find one woman, this woman being Rabab. She refuses to stand up from the grave of Imam al-Hussein. For Imam Sajjad says to her, Oh aunt, we now have returned, or now is our time to return back to Medina. Rabab stands up, she looks at Sajjad, she says, Oh Sajjad, what is left for me in Medina when a part of my heart is buried here in Karbala and another part of my heart is buried there in Sham? Oh Sajjad, with my children scattered over the plains of Arabia, what is there for me to do in Medina? إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون ولعنة الله على أعداء أهل بيت النبوة. اللهم إنا نسألك باسمك الأعظم يا الله يا الله يا الله Allahumma, we ask you, Ya Allah, by the sake of Sayyid al-Shuhada, all the mu'mineen who have come here for this majalis tonight, Ya Allah, do not turn them away except that you accept that you have accepted their hawa'ij, Ya Allah. Any one of our friends or family members who are not in the best of health, through the barakah of this Majlis Husseini, through the shafa'ah of Sayyid Rabab, Ya Allah, you grant them shafa'ah. All our marhumeen and marhumat who have passed away, through the shafa'ah of Sayyid Rabab, make their graves into a garden from the gardens of Jannah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.